Hi guys, this is Stephanie. I'm the creator behind House of Fritz, and I want to thank you guys for joining me today. Today we're going to do some fall projects. I'm trying to get some things ready for my little shop at the Painted Tree Boutiques, and that's in North Richland Hills, Texas. So if you're local, come shop around, check out my booth, check out all the other amazing vendors. Anyway, but we're going to do some fall projects because I'm getting in the fall mood, which it says a lot because here in Texas it's like 1,000 degrees. So it's kind of a struggle to get there, but I am now ready to do fall projects, and that's what we're going to do today. So join me as I start these projects. Okay, we're going to get started using Dixie Belle Chalk Mineral paint in the color Caviar, and a bundt pan or jello mold, one or the other, that I picked up at the thrift store for $1. And then this, I believe it's probably a foot to a table, like part of the leg that they cut off. And then I'm going to use, after I paint it black, I'm going to use the cracked patina to get a crackle effect. So, but we're going to paint the whole thing in, I believe, 2 coats of the Dixie Belle Caviar paint, chalk mineral paint. And I just want to give it a really good solid black coat of paint so that when I use the crackle medium, it will show the black through, just to give it kind of a darker undertone. So I'm going to paint this, and then I'm going to dry it with my heat tool. And here I am adding the second coat, and then again I'll dry it after that as well to move on to the next step. I really have enjoyed this paint. I've used the black Caviar, which is the name of this particular color, quite a bit, and it's just a really good true black, probably Dixie Belle's darkest black color. It covers really well, and while I'm not worried about brush strokes, I don't find that I have too many usually. I'm not worried about the brush strokes on this project because I'm using the crackle medium, and it's definitely going to have a lot of texture anyway, so it would cover that up. I'm not too worried about going down into that bundt hole because I will be using the wood piece to create the stem. And so here I am finishing the drying process, and you do have to be careful because you're heating up metal basically, and without realizing it, it can get very hot if you're holding on to it really quickly, and you may not notice it until it's too late. So just be careful when you're using a heat tool. I'm going to pour out a little bit of this patina, cracked patina, and this is actually by Amy Howard. I have 2 bottles of it. It's a really good product, and so I'm going to finish using it up before I open up my Dixie Belle Crackle product. And you want to give this a really good coat, but you don't want to make it too blotchy, like too heavy in any area. You do want it to be fairly even all over. I do recommend that you use brush strokes in all different directions to get the most realistic crackle. If you use brush strokes all going up and down right next to each other, it'll end up looking a little stripy sometimes. And here I am drying that with my heat tool as well, just to speed up the process for the video. When I'm not in a hurry on videos, I'll just set it aside and let it dry naturally, move on to something else. But obviously I have to get these projects done in a timely manner to produce a video. So now I have mixed up a custom color of orange. I did want it to have a little bit of a pink undertone, and you can't see it, I guess, in this video too much, but the original color was very bright, so I toned it down somewhat. But when you're painting on top of a crackle medium, you definitely want to leave the paint on and don't rub over it too much. Get it on there and move on to the next area, because you can disturb the crackle that starts to form rather quickly, and you'll see it as we go. It's just starting to already crackle. And if you go over it in the spots that have already crackled, it'll just kind of swipe off all the crackle and sort of mess it up a bit. I mean, there's always a fix, but you just want to be careful about going over too many times. You can see that I'm just pouncing more paint in certain areas that didn't get great coverage. But even that will take off some of the existing crackle unless it's dried already. So I'm going to go ahead and speed up the process of this, and a heat tool will also create a little bit more crackle. It definitely helps the process along and drying, but it also helps with creating the crackle. This reminds me of those bundt cakes that sometimes you pull out, and maybe like a pumpkin bread loaf or a bundt cake, and you can kind of see it, like a crustiness of it. And so when you plop the pan over and you see the cake, sometimes you see kind of where the flour kind of crusted and you get some crackle. I don't know why I was too worried about the inside of that. I ended up covering it with the wooden piece, which I actually bought on Whatnot from Royce, who is the owner and designer for Recycled Paper. She does a lot of cool Whatnot shows, and you can get like just salvage wood pieces sometimes, and I bought a little lot that had several pieces. I believe it was probably the bottom of a leg to a table. So now I'm putting clear wax on there to seal it. Because it was a chalk-based paint, I did want to put a sealing coat on it. And because there was black paint under it, I didn't necessarily need to antique it. The wax kind of darkened the color of the paint, and the black sort of darkened it all over. And so I'm going to go ahead now and I'm going to put Titebond on this wood piece, but I'm going to leave some little spots open so I can put dots of hot glue so that I can get a really good hold, but as it's drying, it will be a quick hold with the hot glue. It's kind of a little trick you can use. You don't want to use too much hot glue or it'll squirt out, but I just set it on top to cover that hole and got the excess hot glue off of there. And there is excess of the Titebond around it, but it's okay. I'm going to go ahead, because there's not a lot of surface to attach that wood piece on. I'm going to go ahead and put glue around the edge of it. I'm about to cover all that up, so it doesn't matter that that's showing right now. It looks messy. A lot of times glue will dry clear. This one, I'm not 100% sure if it dries clear. In this scene, it's not completely dried yet, but I started decorating it anyway because the hot glue is holding it on, and so it has dried quite a bit though. And so here I'm adding on some kind of sage green raffia and some fake floral picks, just parts that I've cut off, greenery, fall leaves and berries. And I'm just kind of sticking them in, and I'll add some hot glue to keep them in there, here and there, until I like it. And then I'll put a raffia bow on the front of it. There's a lot of fidgeting with all of these pieces of greenery and florals, just to get them positioned right and, to a way that I like it. And here I used some like floral wire that's paper coated. I did get it out of the floral section at Hobby Lobby and made a tendril. And then I'm about to put on that bow, and I decided it needed something else. So I decided to go ahead and create a stamped tag. And I do that using a piece of drop cloth and some rubber stamps and ink that I have, making sure it's the right size and fraying the edges. And then I do add that off camera, so you'll see it in the finished product. So here's the finished pumpkin, and then we're gonna start with project number 2. Okay, here we are adding the cracked patina to a board that I had laying around because I used the last little bit of some milk paint that I had mixed up. If you know much about milk paint, you know that you cannot reuse it after a certain amount of time. So I all the time will grab something and paint a splotch on it just so in the future I might use it. And this was just a little piece of board that was out of a cigar box. And so I went ahead and put the cracked patina medium on there and went around the edges just to make sure that I get it all covered. And I'm laying down a heavy coat of the custom orange color that I've made. And I'm just trying to heat it up and let it do its crackle job and start drying. And then I decide that some of the areas are a little thin, so I wanted to add a little bit more. And then we will help it dry a little bit more. I use this cute little napkin. It's that little fall Halloween cat, and it's just kind of a moody little thing, and I thought it would go great on this particular project. So I'm just tearing off a little bit more just to kind of make everything a little bit more even though it's torn and it's supposed to look a little more rustic and organic. I do want it to be balanced on both sides, and so I'm just evening it up before I apply the decoupage medium and apply it to this crackled board. So I'm going to lay down my starter strip of crackle medium, and that's just so I can get it started and stuck down, and then we will finish the process of decoupaging this napkin to the board. I think I had a little piece that flipped under, so I was just trying to fix it, and we'll continue to lay it down, and I will start putting the decoupage medium on the other part of the board to adhere it all the way down. Put a little bit on top first and then move on. So it's really, especially with napkins and also larger items, when you're decoupaging, it is great to do sections at a time. And so that's what I did. And now I'm just putting on a final coat of the decoupage medium to sort of seal it, and then that way it makes sure that it stays on really well and is well protected. I go ahead and get some parchment paper, and I use my brayer to sort of press it down. I guess I really wanted to try to see if it would work to get out some of the wrinkles. Honestly, I'm not too worried about the wrinkles, especially at this point, because I have that crackle medium. There's already a lot of texture, and a wrinkle isn't going to show up quite as much, but I just wanted to sort of experiment. And you'll see that the decoupage medium kind of reactivates the paint and the crackle medium, so it kind of pulled a little bit off, but it kind of just adds to the overall texture to the whole piece. And so my next step is I'm just adding an artistic touch, and this is something that you can add or you don't have to. It just puts on another layer, and it's really kind of your own opinion of what you want to add. I mean, if it's not anything you like, you definitely could leave it off and the piece would have just been fine. But it's just sort of my own artistic touch. And you can see the top two corners have been dog-eared, like clipped off. That was part of the original board, and you'll see in the next few scenes that at some point I did clip the other two just to make it more even. Here they are, they've been clipped off, and I went ahead and went around the edge with the gold wax on them afterwards as well. And here I'm just adding some clear wax to sort of protect the edges that didn't get decoupage medium on them. I'll go over the whole thing so the finish, the texture is all about the same with the wax, but because the very far edges with the orange paint didn't get the decoupage medium, I went ahead to put that on to protect it. And so you can see that I kind of filled in the little face of the jack-o'-lantern as well. I'm just wiping off the excess wax, and it will sort of absorb and cure and kind of get a little more even all the way around it. I do think this wasn't quite finished or didn't stand on its own very well, so I went ahead and took out a board that I think I got at a Target dollar spot, and I think it was like $3, and of course it was years ago. I haven't seen those there for a while, and I decided to use this other napkin that had some darker colors to it. And I don't know about you, but sometimes when it's hard to get the different plies of napkin off so you can decoupage, I've figured out this trick. And if you take a couple of pieces of Scotch tape and put on either side, you can start to pull the second white layer of napkin off. A lot of times there's 3 layers. This particular napkin was super difficult, and so I ended up getting it all off eventually. But I went ahead and started my starter strip. I used a balled up piece of cling wrap to sort of press it down so it glides over it easier and doesn't cause it to tear. So that's a trick you can use, and it just gently glides over it to press down and press out the wrinkles, as many as you can get out anyway. And then I just do layers to finish decoupaging it. Then I go over the top and just make sure that it's protected and it would adhere well with the extra decoupage medium on it. And then once that's dry, I will take out my little sander, my little finger sander, and I will sand off the edges of the rest of the napkin so that it is all flush and even around the edges. Here I am sanding it down, and this is a really easy step. I applaud whoever figured this out. It makes it so much easier than going over it with an X-Acto knife. You use I use a finer grit sandpaper on like a tissue or a napkin or a decoupage paper, which is usually like a heavy tissue. When it's something like paper or cardstock, I might use a heavier grit sandpaper on this particular sander. But this was 220, so it was more delicate. And so you can see this board has, you don't see it yet, but it has 2 holes from where the cord was because it was a sign. And so I'm poking through so I can keep an eye on where those holes are and make sure that I have them in the proper spot for what I'm going to do. I'm going to go ahead and take that board with the cat on it, the little plaque, and I'm going to adhere it. But before I do that, I feel like the colors are a little bit darker than what I want to go with the deepness of the portion of the cat. It's a little more moody and dark. So I decide I'm going to use some clear wax over the decoupaged napkin. And I do this so that I can control the next step. The next step is dark wax. And I'm really just trying to darken up those colors in the napkin. They're just a little bit brighter than what I want them to be. And so I'm just trying to get it a little bit darker and moody. And so when you put clear wax down first and then do the dark wax, you can wipe off more of the dark wax versus doing it with the dark wax only, it will kind of absorb a little bit more, and sometimes it's harder to get it off. And so I did try to leave the center section without any wax because wax makes it harder to glue things on. And so I wanted to kind of leave that area with just the decoupage medium and no wax. And so here I am doing the edges with the dark wax so that it can look more finished. The back side is a brown, it's really pressed like MDF board. The front was white, so it worked perfectly for the decoupage to help that napkin pop. But the back side is brown, and I'm just trying to darken up the edges so that it looks better from the side view. And now I'm adding some gold around the edge of the board and just trying to kind of create unity in the piece. So since I added it around the middle section on that part of the plaque, I thought it would be best to add it on the edges of this board as well. Just another artistic touch. And I still have to glue it on, so I'm going to use my little trick with Titebond and hot glue. And so I'm going to put the Titebond quick and thick on there so that I can make sure that it has a really good hold for the, for the future. It'll take time to dry, and because it will take time to dry and I want it to stay where I want to put it to finish the project, I'm going to use hot glue to adhere it to the board, kind of just for the temporary hold. It will hold for a long time, but if you were to store it somewhere hot, it tends to kind of weaken and maybe fall off even. So the other glue, the Titebond, will help it be more permanent. So I put this board on, and I wasn't paying attention to where the holes were for the top of the sign. I don't realize it for a couple of seconds, and that creates a problem because I do want it to make it hanging with some embellishments and ribbon. And so here I am, I'm just about to notice it, and it takes a few minutes and then I do notice it. And while we're waiting for me to notice it, I do want to say that my son has been awesome at doing all the editing on my videos, and I cannot stress enough how much I appreciate him. I could not do this on my own, but I think he left in this section of the video my original reaction so you guys could hear it. So here it comes.
Oh no, crap. Well, I put the holes in the wrong spot.
So I just decide the length of the ribbons that I want to use, and part of this ribbon is from Amazon, and the other part's from Hobby Lobby. I add in some gold, and then I feed it through the holes, and I had to get up, of course, and drill another hole. And so I made a knot in the center to make it easier to hang, and I did a little hot glue on right under the knots that came in the front to kind of make it look more like little tassels. And even at that point, I thought, oh, it needs something else, but I think I already had this idea in my head and was like, oh, I can level it up one more step. And so I decided to use some air dry clay in one of my molds, and I made a few labels, and I ended up making extra ones because, when you need one, it's great to have one already made up. And so I tend to do this a lot when I get in there and start messing with the clay. I go ahead and make some extras. So I made several extra, and what you see here is me just pressing it down and trying to fill all the little cavities for the castings that I want, and then I'm just getting the excess clay off. So I filled the ones that I wanted to, and I used my brayer to sort of smooth them out and flatten them because, of course, they will need to lay flat on something eventually. Then after I smooth them, I'm going to turn them over and let gravity help me get them out. I did use some cornstarch to help them fall out a little easier. When you're using air dry clay in molds, that is a wonderful trick to use to sort of, it's like flouring the pan when you're baking something, just to help it come out easier. And so I used the DOS air dry clay for that. And I decided which one I was going to use, and then I put the others to the side. I do end up stamping the word boo just to kind of create a little playfulness. I go ahead and glue it down with the Titebond Quick and Thick, and you want to make sure when you're using the glue to glue down the air dry clay that you use enough but not too much. You don't want it to be so much that it's squeezing it around the edges, out the edges, because then you have to clean it up, and you might as well prevent that in the first place. So I'm using my finger to sort of pull it all the way out to the edges, because you do want to make sure that the casting is fully secure when you lay it down, and it does need to have glue around the edges, and just putting a thin layer is just enough, and that way it won't squeeze out. So I'm just pulling it to the edges. You do have to be really gentle with these clay castings, because they're of course very soft. You don't want to push them down too much, but so that you disturb the details, but you do need to put enough pressure that you make sure the glue is stuck down to hold it down. And here's where I use some old rubber stamps, the alphabet stamps that I have, and I start in the middle of because the word is only 3 letters, I just use the middle letter and start so that I can center it. Sometimes that makes it easier to make sure that you space it out the right way. And these, of course, are not see-through stamps. I like to use the clear stamps now. It makes it a lot easier to figure out where to put things. But this is just a really old set that's adhered to wood, so you can't quite see what's happening underneath it. I'm going to go ahead and then paint this with the custom orange color that's also above it. And I use a small artist brush to do that. And I'm trying to be careful to not get any paint on the outside of the casting label. This just might be the slowest I've ever painted something. I think that's kind of funny. I usually try to be quick. I think I was really trying not to get it on that decoupage napkin, because it would have really shown up against the black. But I'm going to paint it this really pretty orange color, and then I'm going to, I believe I use gold, maybe rub and buff or gold wax of some sort, and I want to try to get down into the letters to make that word stand out a little bit. I could have even used black. I can't remember what I did, but I really just wanted to make sure that it was moody, just like the rest of the picture. My orange paint by this point, this might have been the last project I used it on, and it was getting pretty thick. I probably should have added some water. It would have made it easier to paint with. And I do start dipping my brush in water over to the side to sort of get it to thin out, just to move it around on there a little bit better, a little bit easier. And I don't know if you've used air dry clay very much, but it'll remain soft for a while, but adding paint to it ends up helping it dry slower. And when that happens, it doesn't crack as easily. Sometimes air dry clay will crack. So here it is where I'm putting the gold wax on it. And I'm really just trying to hit the details on the top edges of the details. Oh, I do pull out black. I couldn't quite remember if that's what I did. I do pull out black paint, and I'm really trying to get that word done. And this is really tedious and hard. And so obviously I made some mistakes. And so I did the heat gun to dry it so that I could go back in with more orange to kind of differentiate the spaces in the letters and the make sure that I cleaned it up a little bit. It's just a little bit of back and forth with making sure that I have the right paint, and my head gets in there a little bit. It's so, so tedious that I really need to be closer to it, but I might block the camera. So obviously I just kind of do my best. Then I start adding more gold wax. And, I am a big supporter of using a lot of gold and everything right now. So anyway, this is the finished project, and I just love how it turned out. So we're going to move on to the next one, and this is the final project. It's a really quick little project. I took a thrifted old salt shaker, and it's a really pretty green color, and I'm just going to make a tiny little floral arrangement. I go ahead and put in these just few little pieces of some florals that I cut apart, and I decide I needed that moss in there to sort of hold it. I don't want it to be necessarily completely permanent. I don't really want to glue everything in there. I feel like the moss will hold it in well enough. And so I go ahead and sort of stick them into that to sort of hold them into their place. And it's going to take some fidgeting, and I love how the moss just kind of helps it to have that fall look. And then I'll also take some ribbon to make it kind of cute. I ended up using just the kind of burnt orange ribbon because it's more bendable, and I really wanted to use the leopard, but it just wasn't going to be as easy to tie on there. And but I did think it was super cute. So I put on this sort of satiny ribbon. I believe I got this at Hobby Lobby, and it's cut frayed edges. I just had the right amount, and just tied a quick little bow, and then sort of secured it. I think I had to glue it in a couple spots just so it would stay where I wanted it to, and just made a quick little cute fall shelf sitter, or you could put it on a tier tray. Made it just a really fun little flower arrangement, fall flower arrangement. I pulled it so that the bow could be tweaked a little bit, and then I know I used some hot glue to sort of hold the tails in just the right position. Probably ended up being a little too perfectionistic with this, but I did want it to turn out the best that it could. And anyway, this is the last little project, and I just want to thank you guys so much for sticking with me through this video and watching me make some really fun things, some fall craft projects, and I hope that it inspired you to start creating for fall and kind of getting in the mood for that. I know we're still in that month that it's a little bit warm, but it's getting there. So here's kind of the finished project, and I just want to thank you again. I would love it if you would like and subscribe and share my video. If you love it here and you're not subscribed, please do so. I appreciate you guys so much for your support. And until next time, I want to say thank you, and I'll see you next time. I'll chat with you in the comments.